She helped a homeless beggar in the street. She fed him, sheltered him, took care of him like he was his father or brother. People advised her to let go the homeless man, but she didn't listen. She continued to help him in any means possibly within her reach. But what they didn't know is the homelessness man's true identity. He was not just a homeless man. His true identity would shock everyone. If you're just tuning into this channel, please subscribe to our channel and give this story a thumbs up. Also tell us where you're watching from. The streets of Lagos never slept. Even as the sun dipped low behind the city skyline, the air still buzzed with shouting hawkers, distant car horns, and the steady hum of life. But for Adeobi, the world quieted the moment she sat behind her sewing machine. Her small tailoring shop, squeezed between a roadside fruit stand and a kiosk that sold recharge cards, was her entire world. She didn't have much, but she had dignity, work, and above all, a heart that beat for others. That evening, as the skies darkened and most shop owners packed up for the day, Adeobi stayed behind to finish a wedding gown for a customer who could barely afford it. She didn't charge much, she never did. She just wanted people to feel beautiful, especially the forgotten ones. It was just past 9 p.m. when she heard it, a low cough, then a groan. She looked up from her stitching and squinted toward the street lamp flickering in front of her shop. A man, cloaked in dirt, his clothes shredded like old rags, was slumped against the wall. His face was gaunt, his beard matted. He looked no older than 35, but hardship had aged him. Jesus, Adeobi whispered, rushing out. People passed by, casting him disgusted looks. One woman pulled her child closer. No one stopped. Sir, she said gently, kneeling beside him, can you hear me? His eyes fluttered open, weak, tired, but kind. I haven't eaten in 3 days, he rasped. Without hesitation, Adeobi helped him up. He tried to resist, ashamed, but his legs buckled. Please, I don't want to bother anyone, he murmured. You're not a bother, Adeobi replied. You're a human being. She helped him inside her shop, laying him on a mat she used during overnight sewing shifts. She grabbed bread and warm gari water from her food flask and placed it in his hands. The man stared at her, confused. Why are you helping me? He asked, his voice barely audible. Adeobi smiled. Because someone helped my mother once, and I promised to do the same if I ever had the chance. Tears welled in his eyes as he sipped the gari. My name is Chuka, he said softly. I'm Adeobi, she replied. Rest. Tomorrow's another day. She watched him sleep, curled up like a child on her thin mat. He had nothing, no bed, no shoes, not even a phone, but there was something about him. Not pity, something deeper. She couldn't explain it. Outside, the wind howled. Inside her tiny shop, two souls from opposite ends of life had found an unexpected connection. And somewhere beneath Chuka's broken appearance, a secret life waited to be revealed. The following morning, Lagos woke up loud and chaotic, as always. Roosters crowed against the distant honk of Danfo buses. Generators buzzed like mosquitoes, and the smell of frying akara drifted through the air. Adeobi had barely slept. She sat cross-legged beside her sewing machine, her eyes fixed on the man who still lay curled on her mat. His breathing was steady, his face more peaceful now. In the calm morning light, she could see details she hadn't noticed before. His fingernails were clean, though cracked. His hands, rough yet firm, didn't look like those of a man who'd lived on the streets long. His face, though unshaven and dirt-streaked, bore the bone structure of someone once admired. Who was he really? Chuka stirred and slowly sat up, rubbing his eyes. You're awake, Adeobi said softly. His eyes found hers. I thought I dreamed it. You helping me. She handed him a warm cup of pap she'd prepared from her last portion of cornmeal. No dream, just kindness, she said with a small smile. He took it with trembling hands. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, just get better. Chuka drank slowly, his body still weak. You don't even know me. Maybe that's the point, Adeobi said, rising to open her shop's wooden shutters. Morning light spilled into the room. She went about folding fabric, arranging threads, and preparing for the day's work. But she could feel his eyes following her, watching her move with quiet diligence, like a woman used to enduring more than she shared. I should leave before I become a burden, he said after a while. Adaobi turned to him, her voice firm. Where would you go, Chuka? The streets? Back to starving? His silence was an answer. You're not going anywhere. You'll stay here and get your strength back. I have some wrappers I can use to sew you a clean shirt. I can't let you spend your money on me. It's not money, she said. It's love cloth. That's what my mother used to call it. Fabric you keep not to sell, but to bless someone who needs it. He stared at her for a long moment. You're not like other people. Adaobi chuckled. Maybe I'm foolish. No, he said seriously. You're rare. Just then the door swung open and a loud voice cut in. Adaobi, you're now running an orphanage? It was Ifoma, Adaobi's childhood friend and the self-declared queen of class in their compound. Her heavily painted lips twisted into a grin as she surveyed Chuka on the mat. Adaobi frowned. He was dying on the road. I helped him. Helped him or harboring him, Ifoma said, folding her arms. Look, I know your heart is pure, but this Lagos no day smile. Be careful. People like this, if fit, be thief. Ifoma abeg go do your makeup business, Adobe said, more sharply than she intended. Ifoma sighed dramatically and walked out, heels clicking against the concrete floor. Chuka lowered his eyes. Maybe she's right. She's wrong, Adobe said firmly. You don't have to tell me your story if you're not ready. But I trust my spirit. He looked up, emotion flickering in his gaze. You're risking your own safety for a stranger. She softened. Maybe I see something in you that even you don't see anymore. That day, she gave him a bucket to bathe, clean clothes she had adjusted, and a spot near the door where he could sit and watch the world go by while she worked. Day after day, Chuka regained strength. He watched her turn down richer clients who disrespected her time. He saw her slip food into the hands of children whose mothers couldn't pay for alterations. He listened as she sang quietly while stitching fabric, humming tunes her late mother had taught her. At night they talked, about little things at first, music, her dreams of opening a bigger boutique, his love for drawing as a boy. But Chuka never spoke of his past. He always changed the subject when she asked where he came from. Still, Adaobi never pushed. She only offered what the world had denied him, dignity. But while she was content giving without condition, Chuka was slowly breaking inside. He hadn't planned to stay this long. He hadn't planned to feel anything. Yet here he was, safe, fed, warm, and captivated by a woman who saw him, not the dirt on his skin. Each time she brought him food or covered him with a wrapper when the evening got cold, a war raged within him. Should he tell her who he really was? Or keep the lie a little longer? She deserved the truth. But she also deserved someone who chose her not just in secret, but in the light. He looked at her across the room as she trimmed a piece of lace under the lamp. She hadn't even noticed her own beauty, how her brows furrowed in concentration, how her hands moved with purpose, how her spirit made the air in that tiny shop feel like a palace. Chuka knew one thing for sure. This woman would change his life, and very soon her world would never be the same again. It was market day in Yaba, and the streets pulsed with the rhythm of Lagos life. Traders called out from behind crowded stalls, their voices rising over the scent of roasted corn and pepper soup. Brightly colored umbrellas covered tables stacked with tomatoes, dried fish, and fabrics in every shade of the rainbow. Adaobi weaved through the case, a basket balanced on her hip and a determination in her step. Chuka walked beside her, a quiet shadow. He looked better now, clean-shaven, with the simple shirt she had sewn him and a pair of sandals she'd convinced a neighbor to donate. He kept his head down, conscious of the stares he drew, but Adaobi walked with her head held high. Why are we here? Chuka asked. I need zippers and thread. Plus you said you hadn't seen the market in daylight. He gave a small, amused smile. It's louder than I imagined. Adaobi grinned. This is Lagos. Noise is part of the heartbeat. As they made their way to Mama Ejima's fabric stall, whispers trailed behind them. Some people greeted Adaobi kindly, others stared at Chuka with suspicion. Still, she greeted everyone with her usual warmth. At the stall, Mama Ejima, a large, boisterous woman with a wrapper tied tightly around her waist, raised her brows when she saw Chuka. Adaobi, who be this one? This is Chuka. He's a friend, she said, choosing her words carefully. Mama Ejima narrowed her eyes. This one looks like street boy. You dey follow beggar now? Adeobi's stomach tightened. He's not a beggar. He's just fallen on hard times. Now so he dey start. You go give him food today. Tomorrow he go steal your shop. Mama Ejima scoffed, shaking her head. You too soft-hearted. I believe in second chances, Adaobi said, keeping her voice steady. Chuka remained quiet, his gaze locked on the ground. The market felt hotter, heavier. Every word Mama Ejima said echoed louder than the last. A few other traders nearby chuckled. I hear say she dey house am, one woman muttered. She done turn tailor to shelter. Adeobi's cheeks burned. Her hands clenched around the thread she had picked up. But then, without warning, Mama Ejima swatted Chuka's arm with a fan. Make it a comot from here before he scare my customers. Chuka flinched. His pride, barely pieced together, shattered all over again. That was it. Enough, Adeobi snapped. The market quieted for a moment. It wasn't like Adeobi to raise her voice. He is a human being, not a stray dog. You insult him because of what? His clothes, his past. What if God judged us like that? Mama Ejima blinked, taken aback. He has done nothing to you. And even if he had, what happened to compassion? What happened to being our brother's keeper? The nearby crowd murmured. Some nodded. Others looked away, embarrassed. I don't care what you think, Adobe continued, her voice trembling with emotion. Chuka is my friend. If that makes me a fool in your eyes, so be it. I'd rather be a fool for kindness than a queen of cruelty. With that, she turned, tossed a few naira notes onto the table for her supplies, and took Chuka's hand. Let's go, she said quietly. They walked away in silence, the crowd parting slowly around them. Chuka didn't say a word until they were far from the market. You didn't have to do that, he said softly. Yes, I did. I've been insulted before. I'm used to it. But you shouldn't be. You deserve better. He stopped walking. Why? She turned to face him. Because you're alive. Because you matter. Isn't that enough? Chuka stared at her, struggling to speak. Her words pierced through years of guardedness, through the walls he had built around himself. No one had defended him like that in a long, long time. Thank you, he said finally, his voice cracking. Adeobi smiled, but her eyes were wet. Don't thank me. Just promise me something. What? Promise me that when life gives you a second chance, you'll take it. He nodded slowly. I will. They continued the walk home, hand in hand, like two people against the tide of judgment and gossip. When they returned to her shop, the sun was already sinking into a golden haze. Adeobi sat at her machine, pretending not to notice Chuka staring at her. But he was. He watched her as if memorizing every movement, every breath. His heart beat faster than it had in years. And deep inside, a question he had been suppressing now shouted at full volume, can she love me, even after she finds out who I really am? The seed of that question planted the fear that maybe her kindness was too pure, too good for the real him. But another part of him, the part being healed by her love, began to hope. The rain fell heavily that Thursday morning, soaking the narrow alleyways of Yaba like the sky itself was weeping. Adeobi sat by her sewing machine, her chin resting on her palm as thunder rolled across the Lagos skyline. There was no light, no fuel for her small generator, and worst of all, no customers. The little money she had made earlier in the week had gone into buying food and medicine for Chuka, who had been coughing persistently the last few days. She didn't regret that choice, but it meant the consequences had arrived at her door. Knock, knock, she sighed. She didn't have to guess who it was. Madam Taylor, a voice bellowed from outside. Abiyu donde hide. She opened the wooden door slowly and came face to face with her landlord. Mr. Ojo, a stout, pot-bellied man who chewed bitter cola and wore a permanent scowl. Oga, good morning, she said, forcing politeness. No greet me, he snapped. Where's my money? Adeobi's throat tightened. Sir, please, I've had a rough month. Business has been slow and I've had extra expenses. I just need one more week. Just one. Mr. Ojo narrowed his eyes. You think this place be charity? No, sir. Then pay or pack. I've warned you before. This is the third month you've paid late. One more day, and I'll throw your sewing machine into the gutter. Tears stung Adeobi's eyes, but she kept her head up. Please, just a few more days. Mr. Oho turned to walk away, then stopped. That man you're hiding in your shop. He fit afford rent? Adeobi flinched. You better be careful, Adeobi. Kindness doesn't pay bills, he spat, then stomped off. She closed the door and leaned against it, her breath shaking. Chuka, who had been sitting quietly by the corner listening to everything, slowly rose. I'm so sorry, he said. This is because of me. No, it's not. This is Lagos. There's always something. You're helping me while you're drowning. I'm not drowning, she lied, just swimming in deep water. Chuka looked down, fists clenched. You shouldn't have to suffer for helping someone like me. Adobe knelt beside him. You're not a burden. Don't ever think that. If I had to choose between a full purse and helping someone in pain, I'd still choose to help. He looked into her eyes and saw something he couldn't explain. Strength, peace, grace. That night, after Adeobi had gone to sleep, Chuka stood in the corner of the shop and stared at her resting form. His mind raced. He couldn't take it anymore. He had the power to fix everything. Yet he remained hidden, paralyzed by fear. Would she still see him the same if she knew the truth? Would the warmth in her eyes turn to calculation, like so many others? He reached into his torn trouser pocket and pulled out something she had never seen, a tiny, worn card folded tightly in plastic. It had a phone number and a name, his driver. He slipped out silently into the night, barefoot, hood pulled over his head, and walked into the rain. The next morning, Adeobi woke up to an unusual stillness. The rain had stopped, but Chuka was nowhere to be found. Panic surged in her chest. Chuka? She called. Chuka! No answer. She searched the street. Nothing. By noon, she had accepted the worst. Maybe he had run. Maybe he was ashamed. Or maybe he thought she'd be better off without him. The pain hit her like a knife. Not just fear, but loss. He had become part of her days, her silence, her heart. Her hand trembled as she sat behind her sewing machine again, this time unable to work. The shop felt emptier than it ever had. But just then, knock, knock, knock. She opened the door slowly, expecting Mr. Oho again. Instead, it was the landlord's daughter holding a white envelope. Good afternoon. My papa say make I give you this. Adeobi opened the envelope cautiously. Inside were crisp Naira notes. A full month's rent, plus 2 months in advance. What is this? She whispered. The girl shrugged. Some man pay him this morning. Tall, quiet, barefoot, no talk much. Just drop the money, leave. Adeobi's eyes widened. Where did he go? He no sabi. He enter keiki and disappear. Adeobi clutched the envelope to her chest, breathless. It was him. Somehow, it was him. He had gone out in the rain. For her. The mystery only deepened. Who was Chuka? How had he gotten that kind of money? And why did he hide it? She sat on her mat that night, watching the doorway long after sunset, hoping he would return. But Chuka did not come back. Not that night. Not the next day. Not for a long time. But even in his absence, he left something behind. An echo of quiet love, an act of sacrifice, and a question that wouldn't let her rest. What kind of beggar pays 3 months' rent in secret and then disappears into the night? 2 weeks passed. Adobe tried to move on with her life, but the silence Chuka left behind followed her like a shadow. She still looked at the mat in the corner of her shop every night, half hoping she would see his gentle eyes watching her again. But it remained empty, cold, still. Every knock on the door made her heart leap. Every unfamiliar voice outside raised her hopes. But none of them were him. And yet his presence lingered, in the extra rolls of fabric he bought her before vanishing, in the quiet memory of the way he'd folded her wrapper when she fell asleep one evening, in the rent that was somehow still being paid, month after month. Something wasn't right. It wasn't just that he was gone. It was the way he left. Sudden, silent, like a ghost who had unfinished business. Then came the men in suits. It was a bright Wednesday afternoon. Adeobi had just finished stitching a baby dedication gown for a new customer when two black SUVs pulled up in front of her tiny shop. She looked up in confusion as two sharply dressed men stepped out, wearing sunglasses and speaking into earpieces. They didn't belong in Yaba. They didn't belong anywhere near this dusty stretch of road. People turned and stared. The taller of the two men approached her. "Good afternoon, Fam," he said formally. "You are Miss Adeobi, correct?" She stood slowly. "Yes. Can I help you?" "We're looking for someone. He goes by the name Chuka. Medium build, around 5'11", short hair, usually keeps a beard. Would have been staying with you a few weeks ago." Her blood went cold. "Who are you?" "We work for a private security firm. We were contracted by a client to locate a missing person. Our CEO. He vanished around the same time you described." "Your CEO," she echoed. "Yes, ma'am. His name is Mr. Chuka Ndubuisi." Adeobi's breath caught in her throat. "That can't be. He told me he was just a beggar. Homeless." The men exchanged a look. "He's far from homeless. He's the owner of one of the most powerful tech startups in Africa. Billionaire, though he hates the term. Very private. He disappeared after declining an arranged engagement. Family's been searching everywhere, until a private investigator tracked some movement to this location." Adeobi's legs weakened. She sat down slowly on her wooden stool. I had no idea," she whispered. The second man stepped forward, voice gentler. "You're not in any trouble. In fact, you may have saved his life. But if he contacts you again, please tell him we're looking for him. His mother is ill. His board is panicking. The media thinks he's in Europe." Adeobi nodded numbly. "Okay." The men handed her a sleek, embossed business card and left as quickly as they had come, their cars disappearing into the street's dust. She sat there, dazed. Chuka, a billionaire? She looked around her shop, the thin curtains, the patched table, the cracked floor tiles. He had lived here, slept on her mat, drunk her pap, helped her sweep the compound. She had spoken to him as an equal, loved him as one of her own. He had hidden it all. But why? That night, as she sat in silence, she remembered something. A neighbor, Mama Nkechi, had once said something strange. "I swear that man looks familiar," she had said after seeing Chuka pass by. "I see him before. Maybe for television." At the time, Adeobi had laughed it off. Now, it haunted her. She pulled out an old Nokia phone with shaky hands and typed Chuka Ndubuisi into the browser. The connection was slow, the images blurry, but one photo loaded. Her heart stopped. There he was, in a tailored blue suit, standing beside a woman in a gala dress, smiling in front of a banner that read Africa Rising Tech Awards. It was him. Clean-cut, confident, unrecognizable, and yet still him. She stared at the screen until the light faded, her mind racing. Everything began to make sense. His quiet dignity, his strong hands, his intelligent eyes, the way he watched people, observed them, the mysterious way he disappeared, the envelope full of rent money. He had been testing the world, hiding in plain sight, and for some reason he chose her. But a dark thought crept into her mind. Was it all a game to him? Had she just been an experiment? A curiosity? A tale to tell over wine to his wealthy friends? She bit her lip, tears filling her eyes. "No," she whispered. "He wasn't pretending. Not with me." She remembered the way he defended her during that rainy day when a man tried to snatch her bag, the way he cried quietly after she gave him clean clothes, the way his voice trembled when he thanked her. That wasn't the voice of a billionaire playing poor. That was the voice of a man, broken, searching. But now one thing was certain. The Chuka she loved was not a beggar. He was a man with a past, a man with power. And now that his world had found its way to her doorstep, everything was about to change. The days turned to weeks. Chuka didn't return. Adobe stopped counting after the first month, but his absence pressed on her like an invisible hand. He had become part of her small world, and now that he was gone, everything around her felt muted. The buzz of the sewing machine no longer brought her peace. Even the laughter of neighborhood children seemed distant. He had vanished like the Lagos rain, intense, cleansing, and gone too soon. And though he was no longer there, he was everywhere. in the empty mat folded in the corner of her shop, in the untouched cup she used to give him water, in the silence that now greeted her every morning. Adeobi tried to carry on. She still worked, still greeted her customers with that familiar smile, but it no longer reached her eyes. Something in her had changed, something she couldn't explain. Her friend Ifeoma noticed. "You've not been yourself lately," she said one day while they shared roasted plantain by the roadside. Adeobi said nothing. "You're still thinking about him?" Adeobi gave her a look. "You wouldn't understand." "I might," Ifeoma replied gently. "I think he meant more to you than you let on." Adeobi sighed. "He came into my life like a whisper. Quiet, gentle, and now he's just gone." "And now you've found out he's a billionaire," Ifeoma added with a smirk. "That part must hurt." Adeobi shook her head slowly. "It's not about the money, Ifeoma, it's the lie. He didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth." Ifeoma softened. "Maybe he was scared. Maybe he thought you'd see him differently." "Would I?" Adeobi whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "I don't know." That night, alone in her shop, Adeobi brought out the business card the men in suits had given her. She stared at it for a long time. Her fingers hovered over her phone. She could call. She could demand answers. She could march into whatever mansion he now lived in and confront him. But she didn't, because deep down she didn't want to chase him. She wanted him to come back, freely, to choose her the way she had chosen him when he had nothing. Far across the city, in the penthouse suite of one of the most luxurious hotels in Victoria Island, Chuka sat by a window, his thoughts lost in the night skyline of Lagos. The city below glittered with life, but inside him, emptiness. He had returned to his world, his empire of meetings, boardrooms, fake smiles, and curated headlines. But nothing felt real anymore, not since he left Adeobi. His assistant knocked gently. "Sir, your schedule, cancel everything tomorrow," he said, not turning from the window. "Yes, sir." As the door closed, Chuka ran a hand through his hair. He had left to protect her, to keep her away from the mess of his powerful world. But every second without her felt like a betrayal of everything she had given him. Her warmth, her kindness, her courage. She had loved him when he had nothing. She saw him when the world ignored him. And now she probably thought he used her. The thought made him wince. He stood staring at his reflection in the glass. Suits, wealth, status. It meant nothing without her. "I need to make it right," he said aloud. His decision was clear. The time had come, not to send a message, not to make a call, but to face her. Face the woman who saw his soul before the world remembered his name. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, or so Adeobi thought. She had just finished adjusting a lace blouse for a customer when a delivery man appeared at her shop entrance, holding a golden envelope. "Miss Adeobi?" he asked, glancing at a clipboard. "Yes," she replied hesitantly. He handed her the envelope, gave a brief nod, and walked away without a word. Confused, she turned it over in her hands. The paper was thick, elegant, and embossed with a strange crest she didn't recognize. Carefully, she broke the seal and pulled out a folded card inside. Her eyes widened as she read, "You are cordially invited to the Faces of Africa, Fashion Showcase Gala Date, Friday 6 p.m. Venue, the Orchid Grand Hotel, Victoria Island. Guest of honor, Mr. Chuka Ndububuisi. Special acknowledgement, Adeobi, Master Tailor, Yaba District." Her hands trembled. Chuka. It was the first time she'd seen his name written with full weight since he left. Not just Chuka, but Mr. Chuka Ndubuisi, the billionaire. The man who had vanished from her life without a word was now listed as the guest of honor at one of the biggest fashion events in the country. Why had he invited her? Was this some kind of joke? A test? She stared at the invitation for a long time, heart pounding. Then she tucked it carefully into her drawer and sat in stunned silence. The night of the event arrived faster than she expected. Adeobi had nothing fancy to wear. Her best work was usually stitched for others, not herself. But that day she did something she hadn't done in years. She sewed a dress for herself. A deep emerald green gown, modest but regal, with flowing sleeves and soft embroidery. She styled her hair into a neat bun, slipped on her only pair of heels, and took a deep breath before stepping into the taxi she had reluctantly